All right, we are recording. Welcome, everybody. The date is September 27th, 2022, and this is the bi-weekly Cloud Custodian community meeting. I will be your host today, George Castro. A few things. This meeting is recorded and posted on YouTube, so please be cognizant of that. And as always, we are under the CNCF's Code of Conduct, so please be excellent to each other. We got a packed agenda for today, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. A lot of PRs people are looking for feedback on that we're going to talk about. But first, a few things here. Can you all see that there?
Yep.
All right. The first thing is governance at Code Day is a go, and we've got the schedule posted. Thanks to all of you that submitted CFPs. I know some of you are in this call. We put together an entire day of amazing content here. And happy to announce that Ashley, the director of operations from the Finos Foundation, will be doing our keynote talk. And we have the schedule posted here, and I'll make sure that the URLs in the show notes. And I will also send this out as a separate email today to the Google group. So this will be a virtual event. It's 100% free, so just click through. And then, as like we did last year, Kapil and I will do a Cloud Custodian State of the Union. If you've been coming to these meetings on the regular, it's basically just going to be a yearly version, a summary of what we've been working on for the past year. And with many submitted talks from the community with lots of good stuff. Just like last year, we're going to make sure that every single one is available on YouTube for everyone to see. But if you can come show up during the actual event, that will be fantastic. So Umair's put together an awesome little show for us, and happy to do that. That is October 18th. It's kind of an all-day thing, so check that out. Next thing, we are testing Slack. You might have seen the pull request where I'm changing the links in the README and some of our resources to point people to Slack. They'll get it'll send them to this page. They'll get an invite, and hoping to get people there. I know Steve is happy that we're doing some Slack. So come check it out. Marco, at some point, not today because he's kind of feeling under the weather. We'll talk a little about how we're going to archive and have useful bots that we can use to make our lives easier for lots of stuff. I do have a separate channel for maintainers. I would like to see one of the things that's been kind of a bummer is sometimes we need reviews and things like that, and then you have to wait for this meeting to ask, hey, could someone check this out? So I'm hoping that with that maintainers or that development channel in Slack, we can kind of do a little bit more ad hoc. Hey, can someone take a look at this PR? What do you think about this issue? That kind of thing, and get that rolling. So if you've got time to hang out there, that would be amazing. With that, we got a few updates from people, and then we'll go on to the PR party. Sonny, we've got 2 or 3 weeks until KubeCon. Do you want to give us a quick TLDR on where Kubernetes is sitting? I think this is 7697. Is this? Yeah, this is the one. Yeah.
Yeah, so the PR is still kind of in the process of getting reviewed and worked on, mostly just from a documentation front at this point, I think. There'll be lots of stuff that we'll be showing off in Custodian Day and at KubeCon. So
cool.
Anyone that's going, feel free to stop by. I guess it's a Stacklet booth, right? And
there's technically 2 booths. We also have a Custodian booth as well. So
okay.
Not at all times, but I think we're doing Custodian booths in the evenings. But you'll find us at both places.
Yeah, if you're going to KubeCon,
if people are interested in helping man the Custodian booth, definitely interested in game for people that are going to KubeCon. Ping George offline, and we'll do that too.
Because I'll have Custodian swag. So if you want the shirt, you got to come find me. So let me know if you're going to KubeCon there. Anybody kick the tires on the Kubernetes provider yet? I know. All right. Anything to talk about image signing? I think this is pretty much, or do you want to talk about this down here when we get to the issues themselves?
Yeah, the image signing, I think is in, or it's all merged and in there. So the dev images are being signed. And then when we get the next release, it'll be signed for the latest tag and the 9.19 tag.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next, I think we should move this one to when we actually get to the PR. I think for some of the release stuff. So I'm gonna skip that one for now. Next bit of thing of on the agenda is Kapil and I have been working on a survey to ask where people are doing their code hosting, their CI/CD stuff. We would love if people would give this a shot. Has anybody filled this out? I posted this on Slack and stuff earlier, and I will be sending this separately out into the mail. So we would love to get your feedback there on how you're using Custodian and how it ties into your pipelines and stuff like that. Kapil, any color to add to this?
Yeah, sorry, just had to get Siri to pause. So this is basically an investigation as we go into shift left, like Terraform parsing, CloudFormation parsing, like how do we enable things in people's pipelines, and understanding like what sort of capabilities we should offer is based on where people are, so to speak. And so this is really just understanding, hey, can you install a webhook if it's in GitHub, or do you already have the ability to access the pipeline, or what integrations with what source systems do you need? And it's really just trying to understand where people are, like, hey, do you use Terraform? Do you use CloudFormation? Is it shell scripts? Do you use Pulumi? Like, there's a million and one tools out there. Mm-hmm. And a lot of this is just trying to help us shape out what we target and what we aim for as we try to make things closer to developers.
All right, great. So follow that link. That would be amazing. We do have an open agenda. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to discuss before we move on to pull requests, issues, and the working meeting part of the meeting? All right, moving on. All right, as you can see here, when we put a little boom next to something, that's something that we'd like to discuss. The way this works is I run a script that shows us activity over the last 2 weeks, and then we pick the ones that are best served by high bandwidth discussion. The first one I got here was actually from someone in the Cloud Custodian on the FinOps Slack, was saying that they were dealing an issue with this one here, find and use of integer variables. And there was a previous issue that had been closed. I mostly just wanted to get this back on someone's radar. And we can come back to it if that helps. So I know there are other issues that people probably want to discuss as well.
Thanks for asking. It was definitely not on my radar. So I'm curious to have a look at it.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember this coming up before. I think this may have been another issue prior.
Yeah, it was 6734 is the previous report. And then they kind of go through this. And then eventually someone asked if we could reopen the issue. So it does feel like someone is running into this. And the person in the FinOps Slack definitely is. So I just mostly wanted to put this on the radar for you all to just take a look. Obviously, we don't need to do a resolution now. So there's that one. That will be in the notes as well. All right, who's this? Add FMS WAF v2 support.
It's from us, Intuit folks here.
Okay.
This is just to follow up the conversation that we had last time regarding when adding support for this firewall manager WAF, whether to use regex or FN match for cloud matching. And
If there's
Bill,
a use case, if there's a use
yeah.
case for regex, we can go with
Yeah.
regex. If like I'm not wedded. I just wanted to make sure we had a use case before we justified regex complexity. Like, and
Yeah,
if there-
so yeah, that use case is documented right there. If we use cloud matching, will be over matching. And I talked to I guess a stakeholder of our tool here that we use into it, and they do not want at all overmatching when it comes to this policy.
well, no one wants overmatching. The question is, is it actually a fundamental, or is it a, yeah, I'll look at it. But yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So basically a thumbs up on this one. All right. Moving on. Redshift, add consecutive daily snapshot count filter.
Yeah, I think this is something Sunny, she and Kapil
So this
might
is
be able to
worth
provide
a,
more context on. Yeah.
yeah, this is worth a conversation. Like, we started getting a couple of these, and I think it's super cool to have this notion on like counting the backup filters. The reality though is that most organizations have multiple notions of what they want to track on a backwards basis. And I think I discussed this prior, maybe with Sunny, is that like, I worked at organizations before, not in financials, that were like, hey, we want to have 6 months of backups, 8 weeks of backups, and the last 30 days of backups. And like being able to do that group by notion here, like, and that's extremely common, I want to say. Like, and so like you want some hot backups, you want some cold backups, you want some archival backups. And this is really only for consecutive daily. But with a little bit of tweaking, like we can get, and I understand this was based on a prior implementation that we already had gone through, but like as we expand this out, I think it makes sense for us to be incorporating additional use cases so that we don't have to deal with compatibility constraints. And we spend a little bit of time up front to incorporate those additional use cases in these filters as a class category of filters that will be better served across many users.
And so then, is that something you guys are working on? Is that something you want us to contribute? If you want us to contribute, is there requirements, a document of these use cases that we want to support?
I think Sunny already got it right there. Like that
Really?
example looks pretty spot on.
Well, is that but that's just an example, right? But it hasn't been implemented or anything like that, right?
It has not been implemented.
Yeah,
it has not been implemented. If your team would like to be active on this, I think that directionally is where we want to go. And if you're game for it, definitely would appreciate it. And if not, then we can.
So taking a look at the sample like a spec right here for this policy, just trying to understand it a little bit more. Then looks like now the period for us, the implementation that we had before, it was just only 4 days, but now it looks like we can pass in different types of period, whether it's days,
weeks, years,
So I think that's pretty straightforward. I think the one that was unclear to us was the backup type. What is this that you guys are thinking of?
Think about like RDS as an example, AWS RDS. Like if I have automatic backups, then when I delete the database, the automatic backups automatically go away. But the entire reason I had the backups was to prevent that from happening so I could restore. So in that context, I want to do some degree of attribute filtering on the backups themselves to be able to ensure that prior to the group being on by date, that I'm looking at the appropriate set.
So question on this. So there's this was already implemented for RDS cluster, and I believe FSX, where it doesn't have this kind of enhanced functionality with the filters. So how are we thinking that should work? It's going to be backward compatible with just.
Yeah, I think we can make it backward compatible via the by defaulting on those
Got it. Yeah.
where it's extant to these additional attributes that match to the existing configuration, let's say. But still allowing people to specify and override the default and have that capability.
Hey, question about that. Does that mean that it's worth putting through the Redshift and EFS change here as is and having a separate follow-up to expand the functionality of that consecutive filter? Or is it worth just doing here rather than?
I'm happy either way. Like, end of the day, implementer's choice. Like, if we just do one, we can do backlog on retrofitting into the others. Like, there's some degree of we want PR to be targeted and focused. If we have a common base implementation across these, I think that is helpful to ensuring that commonality. And as part of that, it doesn't necessarily need to be ideally, as we add this to Redshift, or is this Redshift EFS, or we have the standing PR that will have that as a common base class that has a group by functionality, and then an additional base class that deals with some of the compatibility and defaults. And then we can roll it through piecemeal through the extant as well as adding new. Does that answer your question?
So I think implementer's choice answered the question. I think that that sounds right.
Well, implementer's choice, but we want to drive to this, and the PR feedback will be to try to separate out the base, a base class, just so we can start to add on and then roll back into compatibility for the others.
Okay, I'll take this back with our team here into it. Steven, do you have any other questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Awesome. Great. All right. Add an action for enable an AWS config manage rule. Darren.
Yeah, this one's actually from me a long time ago. Finally have time to actually do some coding and picking up my old PR here.
Ooh,
I believe Kapil already looked at this, and it's not captured in here, but during one of the meetings, the feedback was that this looks good, but the action right now is only supporting enable. And by convention or with Custodian, we typically do it like toggle style, where you can enable or disable. So then the update here I finally did was to make it such that you can pass in enable or disable. Actually, it's enable and then it's set to true or false. So just need someone to take a look at it again.
Super cool. And I didn't have a look at it. I just saw that you had commented earlier today, and wanted to acknowledge that there had been progression on this.
That's it.
Awesome. All right. Oh, this is the one from before. All right. Next sets. Update CI and Docker builds to use poetry. I don't know if.
Yeah, this is part of a number of changes, and there was one from John Anderson. There's one that's still open, actually, which let me make sure I get the right number for you.
Yeah.
One that I need to look at, still on my radar. It's 7800, unifying the docs building process.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go. That's the one. Yes. So John had a PR because he was having an issue running talks to update the documentation to build that. And it was because we had a version of gRPC, it was like a transient dependency that got pulled in and locked. And we needed to, updating to Poetry 1.2 helped, we could run a Poetry update and it would roll back that lock dependency, which is what we wanted, but the previous version wasn't doing that the way we expected. So since we were doing that on the release side, on the generating the requirements, locking, we also, Kapil made the good point that we should actually have that updated Poetry version all through CI, so that we're using the same tools everywhere. So we're doing that, and that's cool. But a related issue is that we've been slowly ripping talks out anyway. And so what John's trying to do here is make sure that we're using the same poetry-driven build process, and we're not still relying on talks under the hood somewhere.
It's an interesting conversation, I think, because we weren't trying to rip out talks in this context. We ensured compatibility with talks, and then we slowly kept moving to poetry because it was just better experience for all the things, but we never actually deprecated it. Talks, let's say, in this context. So it was a weird drift of us doing the right thing initially of keeping compatibility, and then not realizing when that compatibility should have died. And at this point, we're saying we're done with talks, we're poetry, all the things. And I think that's pretty much the right answer at this point. I think we just need to be clear about that in our documentation.
Yeah, I believe we updated CI, we've updated the developer docs for most of it, and then I think the last lingering bit of it was this was the doc builds here. So hopefully, I mean, I'm sure we'll find some lingering references somewhere, but this seems like a good thing.
Yeah,
grep is good. Grep is good, right?
Grep talks in the docs, and
that's exactly what my item says. It says run rip grep for talks.
You got it.
On the thing, because I did the initial removal in the docs, but it was only in the one developer section, and I didn't think to just search everything to it. So I wanted to make sure that we talked about this. Anything that this is, I'm kind of lumping this all under release engineering. Do we want to talk a little bit about these release issues and where we're sitting? I know that we did not do a release in August, and our last one was in July. So who touched it last as I look over at Sunny's general direction? Or AJ, one of you.
Well, yeah, Sunny and I were kind of ping-ponging it a bit, and it's a good question. I'm not aware of any issues, any outstanding issues with the release right now. Sunny, are you?
No, not that I'm aware of. I think we just didn't want to push a release on like a Friday, because that's when we sort of got all the remaining dependency issues ironed out. So,
so maybe we should look at this as an opportunity to do a quick retrospective on the last 2 months and trying to do releases for the last 2 months, where we felt the pain per se.
Yeah, I think the biggest part is automating some of the steps where it can go wrong, mostly around, there's like a sort of specific set of commands you have to run to get the repository in a publishable state, which right now is documented basically in a GitHub discussion.
It's in here somewhere. I'm looking for it.
Yeah. I think at the very least, getting like the pull requests automated so that it's not, there isn't any sort of chance for manually failing is a big part of it. And of course, working towards full automation as well. After that, I don't know if there's a way to really like programmatically fix these sort of like package issues where we have yank stuff or conflicts and stuff like that.
Yeah, the yanked case is interesting because we had already locked the yanked version, so I think it would have just silently worked. I think after we saw John had the earlier PR for the tox doc build to just change the requirements file and get rid of the dependency on that yanked version. And then seeing that, we thought, all right, well, let's downgrade that locked version so we're not depending on a yanked version. That was just a manual determination. It was not because of an error. So I think if we were still depending on that yanked version, it would have pulled in fine. It would have worked. I don't know why it was yanked offhand. I don't recall why gRPC had a yanked version. But But yeah, there are other issues. We know some of the things that we have seen blow up in the past are some of the conflicting dependencies across subprojects. Where we've got like C7 and Mailer requires one version of something and GCP requires something else, and then we have a clash there. And I think there's some work we can do there with trying to resolve that dependency tree at a different level. I know I've had some effort in that direction that was not particularly useful or not directly useful, but it's something we'll want to come back to as part of automating this stuff.
Yeah, and I would say that effort, and just to be clear what that effort was, it was basically inverting the dependency tree from having the top level project have all the dependencies in a single solvable graph versus currently all the providers and plugins are effectively a different dependency graph that we carry common metadata through. So a little more error prone when there is this conflict or there is non-repeatability. But at least in the non-repeatability aspect, does make me wonder if we need like a meta test or some capability to actually determine if that's the case and block that in CI in terms of having churning, like dueling installs, for lack of a better phrase.
I think the other issue that we see frequently is that even if we're bumping a revision of a dependency that's not conflicting with anything else, specifically with Bodo, you get a lot of the policy meta tests that end up failing as a result of, like, for example, config support or security hub support that comes in. And like we could figure out a way to kind of to automate that. But that's always going to be a manual fix, I think.
It is a manual fix, and like the intent with those meta checks, those meta tests was basically to make sure that, hey, you just update it to an SDK that it's like a one-liner for you to go to fix and add support, because we're on top of, I mean, the underlying providers are constantly changing, and it's mostly there to make sure that we keep up with it as a project. But notionally, because of the source modification as opposed to data modification, it's a little bit hard to fully automate. But it's worth thinking about and saying, hey, well, should we derive more things from data so that we can do automated update processes around it, perhaps, or what have you? But came to explore other thoughts in this direction. But yeah, noted, I think everyone who's ever updated the SDKs has felt that those meta test pain. Maybe we turn them into warning and GitHub annotation per se. Like, there's different options.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, it's not difficult to address the tests, but it is, yeah, it's something that I don't see a really easy or elegant way to address via automation. Because even if we automate like the sort of like allow listing of like config types and we just ignore it, the project itself will get stale because we don't have config support for stuff that's already in the AWS registry. And on the other hand, we probably want to just try to figure out a way to fully just automate the mapping between the config types to custodian resources and security hub. Like, that's probably a more holistic fix.
I was just wondering about, I believe there actually are examples of where the CFN type and the config type are different.
Right. Yeah, that is true. I wonder if maybe that's more of a 20% thing versus like a...
It's like a 5% thing, to be fair.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, yeah, maybe we start coding for that, that delta there instead of the way we do it now.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like the only way we can have any automated system deal with this is if it's out of a data store, as opposed, like if we're editing. I don't know that I trust Oh well. Code rewriting tools are that are actually changing semantics are always a little bit iffy, and dynamic language is my rephrase.
Yeah, I think the security hub one is a little bit more complex because that does require like actual implementation of like producing the proper payload to send to the security hub reporting stuff, reporting service. So
yeah, I mean, security hub is always going to be an adaptation. There is no that is always manual. Like, and that there's a reason why that backlist is growing is because it requires thought and time and attention and testing, and it is. I mean, Security Hub underneath the hood, and it shows through on their schema is effectively going to Elasticsearch, and this is why they have to remap a bunch of keys, and it's pretty arbitrary. Yeah. So that one's manual. End of the day.
yeah, but I think that at the very least, like, we could start with understanding, accepting that there are going to be these manual fixes that come up, at least automating the parts that can be prone to error. Like for this last one, I did the package increment after the package rebase, which caused headaches down the line. Like that could very easily just be a simple GitHub action that creates the PR, and then people, contributors, community members can come in and clean it up before it gets merged in. And I think that would solve a good amount of or at least some of the headache for now. It also would put us on it would make the cadence a lot easier to understand because the PR would just show up one day, as opposed to having one of us remember to start the release process.
It's a good goal to drive to. It's good to know what the pain points are. Thank you for going through that. Jared, I'll hand back to you.
Yeah, Kapil, you had mentioned something about sorry, I had to step out to bio there. Getting rid of test PyPy. Did you cover that while I was
yeah. So there's so our goal, I think, is to fully automate. If our goal is to fully automate release, that means we need to fully automate functionally installing Custodian and running it. And test PyPy has a number of different pain points in that regard. And primarily is that it is a mirror to prod PyPy and has the same access management as prod PyPy, which is not scriptable. Not so effectively, we have to, anytime there's a new maintainer or new releaser, we have to go add them to a bunch of repos ×2. And that's a bit silly. What would be ideal, I think, is for us to, I mean, there's a lot of PyPy repositories from the cloud providers or third-party at Artifactory that we can utilize for this purpose, and then we can actually build like a functional release testing process, let's say, where we're actually publishing to a artifact repository that is clean, that has those things, and that we publish to them. We then install from them, run a functional test or two, and then say, hey, that worked, and now we do the full release into actual. So test PyPy, unfortunately, is just a management burden to automating releases and getting, so I would say that it's probably easier for us. It's mostly a pain point on the access management to it. I would say one of the end goals of fully automated releases in the secure supply chain context is just getting humans out of the loop. Actually removing access from humans from release processes.
Any feedback on that before we move on? All right. Next up, the 10-cent folks have been showing up. Do you want to give us the quick TLDR on this, Kapil?
Yeah, so they're not in the time zone aligned to come to this meeting, and not all are native English speakers, which we should always be conscious of whenever we're doing a community meeting, because I know we've had folks here from all over the world, but that crew in particular, I think, would be well served with being cognizant per se. But they've done a lot of great work, and the 10-cent provider is available. It is strictly pull mode. There's very few resources right now, but this is shiny new. This is the last 2 weeks, and it has been coming along pretty well.
All right. Any questions on this before we move on?
I'm assuming there's no one here that uses 10 cents, so let's move on.
All right. Infracost Integration Act cost filter 7789.
Yeah. So Infracost is a startup with a couple open source components. They're initially targeted towards shift left for cost, which is a little bit not actually sure makes a whole lot of sense given most cost things are based on utilization. But I'll leave that aside. It's still interesting for folks, I think, to get a slice and dice on their infrastructure based on cost. I think there's probably some other things we can do it on a more class-specific basis. Right now, a lot of this is targeted towards AWS, even on the Infracost stuff. It effectively means a resource adapter per resource type to be able to utilize this. I am supportive of it. It is a third-party sort of overlay. It is something that's relatively straightforward to sign up for, self-host. And I think the question to me is whether, when we use AWS budgets or budget forecasts, which are another option, I think, in this space, they're on an aggregate basis, which sometimes you just want to know. Sometimes you want other things. Sometimes you just want to know, hey, what EC2 instances are costing me more than $1,000 a month, or RDSs that are costing me more than $5,000. And in that context, this is more better purpose suited to that use case. Whereas if you want to do a slice and dice across budget filtering tags, or budget filtering capabilities, then budgets are a better use case, better implementation fit. And I think we should do both, frankly. Given the macroeconomics of our times, we should help people however we can.
So you're pulling the costs from this Infracost.io, is that?
So Infracost is it's worth taking a minute just to explain what it is. Infracost is effectively a service and a set of open source software. The underlying component in this context that we're interacting with is what we call their pricing API. And the pricing API is effectively some Node.js in a Docker container that you can self-host if you want. When you self-host, you have two options. Effectively, if you download the raw price book across the clouds, you're talking about multiple gigabytes of data.
Yeah.
And so what this is trying to do is effectively just give you a unified interface to that price book.
My question was, why don't you just directly from the the price? But yeah, that it is huge.
Yeah, it's gigabytes. And so if you look at actually George, if you're driving, can you go up another level in the repo to actually look at in the repo? Because we're not looking at that. And if you click on repositories at the top and do API or price, actually do price. Yeah, there you go.
There it
Pricing. That's what we're actually targeting.
Cool.
Ah,
That's really cool.
that is cool.
Yeah, I pulled it. I pull the AWS. It's huge. It's a pain in the butt. And then they also
It's gigabytes of data. So this has two optional modes.
it duplicates.
Go to that, George, if you scroll down to that diagram. Yeah, there's tons of variations. So effectively, if you run this, you run it self-hosted, you can use the extant one. So that portion where that's them, you can also you also have the option of pulling that directly. So I think it preserves optionality, and the challenge with most of the cost explorers and budget stuff is that you've got it's designed for aggregates and it's not designed for individual resources. And it's just because of, the reality when you're coming from that size that you're dealing with aggregates and trying to slice and dice things based on cost dimensions, et cetera, in Explorer or in budgets. But in the custodian context where you can actually do actions on individual resources, then it makes sense. This actually has a lot more, it has a good degree of additional utility.
Kavil, do you know, does this just look at sort of this base pricing, or does this take into account savings plans and RIs and all the other cost things you can do? Like, is there any sort of integration with that?
I believe you just asked, how do I start a fight on an airplane? And that's you ask the person next to you how much they paid for their ticket. But yeah, no, not in the open source as far as the API notion. You're getting list prices, so it is a good relative basis. It's a relative basis for comparison. It is not book price, let's say. Sorry, it is not financial CFO book pricing. It is list pricing.
That to CFO.
Well, I mean, try. All you have to do is show them your monthly AWS bill and how it changed after, like a day or two after it posted with discounts.
Yeah, this is cool, very cool, especially if I can just jack this right into the YAML.
All right, so 7789 is the PR to check out. Do you want?
I've dropped some review comments on it.
Okay,
it's still a work in progress. I think it's we're in the prototyping days, and I still think it also makes sense for us to have native cloud budgeting capabilities because those will expand. So, would like to expand in both directions, but this is useful just because most of those budgeting APIs are aggregates against the aggregates and slicing and dicing against the aggregates, and this can give us individual resource, which is also useful individually because it maps, I think, just as well natively to Custodian.
all right. Next, maybe wanted to look at 7759.
Hey everybody.
Hello.
Hey. So this is the PR for the connect resources, like to have the tagging functionality. So I think Peter has this PR in, and since he's out of office now, I'm kind of taking his role. So yeah. Before, he had 180 files, and then we reduced it to 84. So if you want to give me a quick overview on what resource types we have here, we can go through it. Yeah, most of them are the files that we created. Most of the files in those 84 files are the test files that come as result of the test, because there are 8 new resources that were created, and then we do have tests for all the resource types that we have there. So it by default generates 3 to 4 files for each test. So that's the reason why we had a lot of files created here.
All right, who wants to take a stab at this one?
Yeah, the main file is connect.py.
There we go.
So we already have a connect instance resource that has been created unmerged. and we have it available in Cloud Custodian. But on top of that, like we have like different resource types that we are creating now, like the connect user. The how we went about this is like the approach we have taken is like we are taking the parent child kind of relation, because there are like so many attributes that a single resource type can have. Like for example, if you take the user, can you scroll a little bit down, like where the new, yeah, here, like the right side, yeah. We are having a parent child relation, like, and we have like connect user resource, and that user has the address, like phone number, all this kind of attributes that are associated with the user. And we are using the a map here, like parent child map, and we are gathering all the information. And
So could you clarify what resources? Like, I mean, Connect is, a call center application.
yes,
You've got high level constructs, but you have a lot of so generally speaking, Custodian tries not to deal with data versus control plane configuration. So if you're talking about like customer contacts or employee, call center contacts, that's almost feels data plane, but it's, well, the latter is maybe manageable as a large control plane. The former is not per se. And I'm just trying to understand, like, what resources are you trying to, what are your use cases per se? And in terms of, are you trying to expand into the control plane of call center, go from the control plane of Connect to the data plane of Connect, or is it, what is the scoping of the use cases? If you, either one that you're comfortable sharing.
Scoping, couple, like what is it that exactly, like, the scope means like why we are why do we want to have these, or like I didn't get your question quite well.
So Connect as a resource is very pervasive
Basically,
in its ABO's permissions. Yeah,
yes.
it touches a lot of different services, and so I just want to be clear that we're not doing data plane resources, and if we are, that's okay. I just want to make sure that we are being clear about what those use cases are and what the data set size is. But like when we deal with EBS volumes or snapshots, we have to deal with a volume potentially in the millions, and so there are certain control plane use cases that we just have to deal with cardinality. I just want to be clear. What are the children in this? Let's say.
Got it. So the children in these are like, for example, like you have the connect agent status, right? We are mostly talking about the the connect contact flow, connect agent status, and hours of operation, and connect phone number. So these are the kind of data or like information like we are dealing with here for the connect.
And the policies you want to enforce in that?
I'm sorry, I'll throw in. I'm concerned from my standpoint. I mean, I think the intent of these policies is to ensure we can do tagging on resource types.
Yeah.
I don't believe we should be, personally, I don't think we should be touching anything in that data plane. That data plane scares me because that data plane includes stuff that's all covered under PII. We most certainly don't want to have that stuff floating into custodian data sets. My opinion, I think that's not something we should be doing. I know we don't have a control that says we need to collect that data. I'm not sure why custodian would ever care about an end user, a user connects information.
And
I guess is my concern.
Yeah, I think that's totally 100% reasonable because now we're out of looking at DMs into humans contact info, and that it's 100% where I was trying to go. And control and Connect itself as a service is bridging into many different APIs. So if I heard it correctly, it was mostly the question as far as the use cases underlying is actually tagging.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think this use case should be limited down to, we need to tag the resource types to make sure that they meet our tagging requirements, but none of this data plane data needs to be, none of the data plane, the sensitive data plane data we're talking about needs to be in there. I just need to know the resource identifier R, and if that's the case, or whatever it is, and then can I place a tag on it, and can I evaluate that tag? I think we can pull a lot of this stuff out.
I think, yeah, I think I can answer that question, David. Here, like, we are not collecting the, like, for example, like if you take the phone number, right? We are not directly taking the phone number, as in, like, I think what we are concerned about and what we want to collect here is the ARN of that resource, and then, like, we are checking if that is having the tags that we want to have. So that's all, like, we are collecting here.
Okay, yeah, I mean, as long as we're not pulling the information about, I don't want to get into pulling the data of the resource itself. I want to pull the identifier of the resource, and I want to limit it to that, right? I think that's what we should be doing from a custodian standpoint.
Yeah, all we are interested in is, like, the ARN of the the resource type here, and we are checking for that.
Okay.
But wouldn't that also pull in the contact details? Like if we're looking at a phone number or the ARN, that would also pull in the.
And let's be clear, like it's not like the problem is if we pull in a resource, like a Connect resource that has that information, even if you're not evaluating it, it's in the result set.
Yep.
Like that's the difference between data plane and control plane, like, and the PII aspects that we want to be aware of and conscious of.
So what would be our, like, next steps, like, to get this in? Like, if we are concerned about, like, how do we address that concern? Like,
I think this is going to require something offline of this conversation to go dig a little bit deeper. George, if you could make a note that and I will go look at it. I just want to make sure that we're all speaking the same language and that we've got the same constraints and concerns in mind as we look at this. And note it and appreciate it for bringing it up. Like much appreciated for bringing it up. And I have not seen this particular PR.
no problem.
All right, and we're about time, so I'll roll over all the other any of these burning here. Let me just check. That's more Relang stuff, more talk stuff. We already covered that. All right, that pretty much covers the agenda. Anything else people would like to bring up? I will post the notes as usual to the usual places, including Slack, the list. And if someone can look, just a reminder, if anyone has time to look at 7553, that would be amazing. Anything else? Going once? Going twice? All right, awesome. Everybody have a good day. And reminder, if you're going to KubeCon, let me know so you can get your t-shirt, and I will sort out a t-shirt swag thing here at some point. We're almost there. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Pratish has his hand up there before we close.
Oh, wait, no. Is he gone?
Maybe. All right, next week.
All right, we'll get him next time. All
Thanks,
right, gotcha.
See ya.
Thank you.